Shortly after the start of the Nara period, a political upheaval called the Rebellion of Prince Nagaya occurred. Prince Nagaya, the central figure in this political upheaval, had Prince Takeshi as his father and Prince Minabe as his mother. He was a man of honorable origins. Prince Takeshi supported his father, Emperor Tenmu, during the Genshin War and made a major contribution to the victory. Next, let's look at the origins of Princess Minabe. During the Ichi incident, Soga no Kuriyamada no Ishikawa Mero gave his daughter in marriage to Emperor Tenji as a condition for his cooperation with him. Princess Minabe was the daughter of Emperor Tenji and his daughter. In other words, Prince Nagaya was the grandson of both Emperor Tenji and Emperor Tenmu. Furthermore, Princess Minabe was Empress Jinmei's sister. Furthermore, Empress Jinmei's daughter was also the wife of Prince Nagaya. Thus, based on his family history, Prince Nagaya was clearly a person of extremely noble origins who represented the imperial family. But while his noble lineage brought him to the forefront of politics, it also created new conflicts. Being a man of noble blood, he naturally rose through the ranks. He was appointed Chief Secretary of the Imperial Household Ministry, responsible for the affairs of the Emperor of Japan and the imperial family. Shortly thereafter, he was promoted to Director General of the Ministry of Ceremonies, responsible for personnel affairs. The reason behind his success was likely the high expectations of Empress Jinmei, who was the Emperor of Japan at the time. However, Empress Jinmei was not the only one who had high hopes for him. Fujiwara no Fuito, the most powerful man at the time, also married his daughter to Prince Nagaya. His ideal political system was one in which the imperial family and clan worked together around the Emperor of Japan. To achieve this, he intended to entrust the government to Prince Nagaya after his death. With the strong support of Empress Jinmei and Fujiwara no Fuito, Prince Nagaya was promoted to dainagon, rising to the second highest position in the government. After the deaths of Fujiwara no Fuito and Empress Jinmei, he finally took control of the government. Although he had lost his powerful backing, he continued to work on reforming the Ritsuryo system even in this unstable situation. The first thing he faced was the nationwide shortage of kubundan. At that time, the government provided rice fields called kubundan to its citizens. The country ran on a system in which the people were required to pay the crops harvested there as taxes. However, as the population increased over time, a serious problem arose. There was a shortage of kubundan. Prince Nagaya thought, I have to do something about this bad situation. He then planned to mobilize the farmers to create new rice fields. This is the 1 million chobu reclamation plan. Cultivation means clearing fields or mountains to create new rice paddies or farmland. But the scale of this plan was far too grand. So the difficulty of mobilizing peasants and the practical labor shortage made this simply not feasible. As a result, the plan was quickly abandoned and replaced with a new, more practical policy. That is the Sanza Ishin Law. The Sanza Ishin Law can be roughly divided into two categories. The first point concerns what happens when new ponds or irrigation canals are built and rice fields are cultivated. The second point concerns cases where old ponds or irrigation channels are restored and rice fields are created. In the former case, ownership of the land was recognized for the person who cultivated it and for up to 3 generations, his/her children and grandchildren. On the other hand, in the latter case, only the generation in which the land was restored was allowed to own it. The Sanza Ishin Law had a huge impact on Japanese society. Before that, farmers were only able to own kubundan within the limits stipulated by the Ritsuryo. However, this system allowed them to own rice fields, albeit under certain conditions. Apparently we will be able to own the land for a limited period of time. Let's create a new rice field. People who thought this way began to cultivate land all over Japan. This law was also beneficial for the farmers. It was a realistic policy with a high degree of feasibility. As Prince Nagaya pushes ahead with political reforms, the long-awaited crown prince, Prince Obito, finally ascends to the throne. That person was Emperor Shomu. Upon ascending to the throne, Emperor Shomu declared, I have inherited the imperial throne that has been passed down from my ancestors. I want to bestow blessings on the world and govern the people. These words also show that Emperor Shomu had a strong desire to rule the country. However, looking at the personnel changes issued at the same time as Emperor Shomu ascended to the throne, it was Prince Nagaya who continued to play a central role in politics. Emperor Shomu was keen to adopt a new political approach. However, his ideals were far removed from reality and he never achieved political power. And it wasn't just politics that bothered him. He was also concerned about the issue of lineage. His mother, Fujiwara no Miyako, was a member of the Fujiwara clan, as her name suggests. This made him feel inferior, wondering if his bloodline was inferior to that of imperial family. In particular, both parents of Prince Nagaya, who was in power at the time, were members of the imperial family. So he could not help but be aware of his noble lineage. It is also likely that they were frequently compared by those around them. Is my bloodline suitable to be the Emperor of Japan? Will I be able to pass the throne to my child of my own blood? Emperor Shoma was constantly troubled by these problems. To solve this problem, he wanted to increase the authority of his lineage. So he turned his attention to his mother, Fujiwara no Miyako. In the first place, the cause of his troubles was that he was of Fujiwara clan bloodline. So he thought that by elevating the status of his mother, Fujiwara no Miyako, his bloodline would gain more legitimacy. And he commanded the people to call his mother Daibunin instead of Bunin. By adding Dai, he tried to set her apart from the other Bunins. However, Prince Nagaya responded at this point. He was strict with the rules of the Ritsuryo. The format and terminology of documents are determined by Ritsuryo. According to the Ritsuryo, her title should be Kaudai Bunin. He insisted. This was like pointing out that the Emperor of Japan's orders were against the law. Upon hearing this, Emperor Shoma was forced to retract his imperial decree. As a result, his new accession to the throne would have been a disgrace. He was worried about whether his son would be able to inherit the throne. Even as he thought this, he hoped that a boy would be born soon to be his son. He already had a child, Princess Abe, with Fujiwara no Fuito's daughter, Komaiwashi. He also had a daughter, Princess Ino, with Agate Nukai no Hiratoji. However, since both of his children were girls, he was waiting for the birth of a boy who could inherit the throne. Meanwhile, he and Komaiwashi were blessed with a long-awaited baby boy, Prince Motoy. Naturally, he was overjoyed. And he thought, I must make Prince Motoy succeed to the throne at all costs. Later, Prince Motoy was made crown prince when he was just 1 month old. It was unprecedented for a newborn prince to be appointed crown prince. By doing this, Emperor Shoma probably wanted to make it widely known that from now on, a child of my bloodline will succeed to the throne. However, something unexpected happened. The long-awaited baby boy, Prince Motoy, passed away from illness before his first birthday. His parents, Emperor Shoma and Komaiwashi, and their family, the Fujiwara clan, were deeply disappointed. Emperor Shoma once again found himself troubled by the issue of imperial succession. What he found most threatening was the presence of Prince Nagaya, who was obviously of noble blood. Prince Nagaya's wife, Princess Kibi, was also a member of the imperial family. This meant that any boy born to them would be 100% of the imperial family bloodline. On the other hand, Emperor Shomu's wife, Komaiwashi, was from the Fujiwara clan. This meant that any boys born to them would be more than half Fujiwara clan in bloodline. In other words, the latter was in a less worthy position as heir to the throne than the former. If things continue like this, the throne may pass to a child of Prince Nagaya's bloodline. I have to do something. This sense of anxiety dominated Emperor Shomu's mind. However, Emperor Shoma was not the only one who was anxious at the time. Fujiwara clan also felt a strong sense of crisis. After Fujiwara no Fuito's death, his sons took control of the Fujiwara clan. Among them, Muchimuro in particular was an idealist of clan-based government centered on the Fujiwara clan. However, the situation changed dramatically when Prince Asahi was born to Emperor Shoma and Agate Nukai no Hiratoji. Prince Asaka might become the crown prince. If that were to happen, the power of the Fujiwara clan would weaken. This isn't good. That's what Muchimuro thought. And so he came up with an emergency solution. It was a plan to make Komaiwashi the empress. If she became empress, even if no sons were born, she could become an interim emperor of Japan and buy time. At this stage, there was no other way to produce an imperial successor of Fujiwara clan blood than this strategy. However, the problem that arose was the presence of Prince Nagaya, who was strict about the rules. The Ritsuryo codes stipulated that only a woman from the imperial family could become empress. Therefore, opposition from Prince Nagaya was inevitable if Komawashi were to become empress. So Prince Nagaya was a major obstacle for Fujiwara clan. As a result, the movement to eliminate Prince Nagaya accelerated, led by Muchimuro. The Fujiwara clan schemes reached their peak, and finally a political upheaval occurred that would decide the fate of Prince Nagaya. That was the rebellion of Prince Nagaya. The incident began with a tip-off from certain individuals. The two visited the Fujiwara no Mero residence and made the following appeal. Prince Nagaya has secretly mastered sorcery and is plotting to overthrow the Emperor of Japan. The recent death of Emperor Shomu's crown prince was due to his curse. This was a false accusation fabricated by Fujiwara clan. However, Emperor Shomu, who was greatly shocked by the death of Prince Motoy and already felt that Prince Nagaya was a threat, believed this tip-off. That night, troops were mobilized under the command of Fujiwara no Umakai and Prince Nagaya's residence was surrounded. The next day, Prince Nagaya's all communication with the outside world was cut off. The Daihokkan, led by Fujiwara no Muchimuro, was dispatched to the residence of Prince Nagaya. Their purpose was allegedly interrogation. However, their actual purpose was to force Prince Nagaya to admit to a crime he did not commit. Under these pressures, Prince Nagaya, Princess Kibi and their sons, who were likely to succeed the throne, were driven to suicide. In this way, the Fujiwara clan overthrew Prince Nagaya and took control of politics. Later, Muchimuro, the mastermind behind the coup, was promoted to dainagon. He finally succeeded in making Komawashi his empress. As a result, for the first time in Japanese history, a woman outside the imperial family became empress. After that, Fujiwara no Muchimuro took the lead in politics at the Daihokkan, and the reduced number of Daihokkan was replenished with new personnel. As a result, all four Fujiwara brothers attained the rank of counselor or higher. The four Fujiwara brothers system led by Muchimuro was established. The Fujiwara clan's political base was greatly strengthened.